Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started this afternoon. I know we have others who will join us as they are able to enter the Zoom room, but good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of time to join us. I'm Kathleen Mathers. I'm a principal here at Education Strategy Group, or ESG, and I lead our career readiness portfolio, which essentially means that I have had the honor and privilege of leading a lot of our pathways work in states and communities across the last 10 years. We have a fantastic lineup of panelists that I'm excited to introduce to you this afternoon, but just before I do that, I am going to spend just a couple of minutes setting a little bit of context for what we're going to talk about related to pathways this afternoon, and then I'll pull everyone together into a conversation. But I think we want to start off with kind of some big picture framing here. Austin, if you want to go ahead and jump in. We know that economists have been telling us for quite some time now that students need education and training beyond high school to access good jobs. The most recent estimate has climbed to up to 85% at this point. So 85% of good jobs requiring some level of education or training after high school. And our translation of that is that high school graduation can no longer be the destination, but rather a stepping stone on the pathway to good life. We believe that the way forward is really to ensure that every student, regardless of their immediate next steps after high school, graduates on a pathway with real momentum towards a personally fulfilling, financially rewarding career. And I think we have that confidence when we look back on the field over the last 10 years and how the field has grown. There's been some really, really strong work that's been done across the last decade with a lot of tremendous impact. So, as an example, 41 states in DC, including career readiness indicators and their accountability and public reporting systems. 10 years ago, that was single digits. Hardly anyone had any kind of career readiness indicator in their systems. 28 states now providing financial incentives for work-based learning. Again, an indicator of the importance of this work. That was zero a number of years ago. 47 states and DC now having requirements for schools and districts to provide middle school career exploration activities. That's a sincere acknowledgement of the fact that the work has to begin much sooner. We really have to pull this down into middle school, especially when student disconnection starts in earnest. And help those kids understand the range of career options that are available to them, help them explore what they're interested in and good at, so that when they get to high school, they have somewhat of an idea of what they might want to study, what they might want to learn more about. 48 states and DC having statewide dual enrollment policies. Again, a nod to the fact that we need education and training beyond high school, so let's get our kids a head start. Let's get some early momentum for them so they can move forward effectively. And 35 states providing funding through state or federal dollars to incentivize credential attainment. Those are big statistics. And yet, we know the field, despite all this progress, still has substantial challenges facing us. And there are a lot that we could name, but we'll lift up four in particular because they're sort of primary among the challenges that we face. Number one, that despite the fact that we have many more market-driven pathways and far greater student access to them, the experience for many students within those pathways remains disconnected. So we have a lot of kids entering pathways, studying a particular program, and then they might take some early college courses that aren't really related to that program, or they get a little work-based learning experience that again isn't terribly connected. And then they try to move forward with a credential and they don't have the pieces they need and the forward momentum that they seek to be able to say, I'm moving forward on my path. In terms of work-based learning, there's a lot of energy around work-based learning and a nod towards the importance of helping students apply what they're learning in classrooms, build their technical skills, their professional readiness, their professional networks as well. And yet we know it's really hard to get experiences for all kids. We're only reaching a few rather than meeting all of them. Our accountability systems are doing a great job at valuing career readiness in ways they never have previously. And yet, sometimes it's not aligned with the knowledge, the skills, the experiences that kids need to really move them forward beyond high school. And then perhaps most importantly, the persistence of college or career as mutually exclusive options. And that one I think we want to double click on a little bit. I think if we step back and think about this, we all know that career pathways done well prepare kids for a whole range of opportunities after high school, including college. So Austin, if you want to flip to the next slide there, I think what we would say is we've got to stop bifurcating. right, between college or career. All students belong on an intentional pathway, and we would suggest college pathways are career pathways, and career pathways are college pathways. So we want a new vision. We want to take all this into consideration and say we've made a lot of progress. These challenges are still in front of us, but our new vision is that every student finds and follows a pathway to opportunity, gaining the knowledge, skills, and experiences needed to access a personally fulfilling, financially rewarding future. Last month, we were able to release a new report called Forging Futures, which is our vision for this work. We take that vision and we break it down into sort of a tactical blueprint of how we might achieve that vision. So we've got 5 big picture recommendations, each supported by sort of sub-recommendations, as well as specific action steps that our key leaders can take, our state leaders, our local leaders, our intermediary leaders, that will help get us on the same page of moving all kids forward on this pathway. You're going to hear from leaders from each of those sectors today, but we do want to spend just a minute talking about those 5 big picture recommendations because they're going to provide important context for our conversation. So the first recommendation you see here is to position and empower every student to graduate high school on a pathway to success. And when we say every student, we really mean every student. And how do we put all students on that pathway? We hope to do it through this core 3, that all students are not only on a pathway, but they all get these interrelated, interconnected sets of experiences. That number 1, they're getting early college coursework aligned to their future aspirations, and hopefully 9 to 12 credits that come from that. Number 2, there is a culminating work-based learning experience that is related to that gives them an opportunity to test things out and see how they feel and grow from that in terms of their technical skill, professional skill, their employer relationships that may open doors to jobs down the road. And if they've done those things well, they are then well set up for earning a credential of value, one that is particularly relevant to what they want to do with their future. So all students on a pathway with these core 3 is kind of the big picture first recommendation. The second recommendation is carrying forward student credentials and skills from secondary through post-secondary and into the workforce to really accelerate their path forward. Very often students are earning credentials or earning credits and they're not counting, so we're missing the opportunity to really propel them forward. Our third recommendation is about building student agency and ability to navigate career options, to develop future resilient skills, and to leverage social capital to pursue a life of opportunity. We know we have to be relentlessly focused on knowledge, skills, credentials that students need to prepare them for the opportunities they seek. And yet we would be pretty naive if we thought relationships and networks didn't have something to do with opening doors to those opportunities. So really want to be inclusive of those things as well. Recommendation number 4 is about recalibrating the role of employers. I think we've all seen tremendously in our economies that the economy is changing very quickly. Occupations are fading. Occupations are coming in. Emerging technology is impacting what employers are looking for in those jobs, the knowledge, skills that they need. They're on the front line. Let's bring them in. Let's leverage their market insight and market intelligence to help us figure out what we need to do differently to better align our pathways with good jobs. And let's enlist and recruit them to scale career exploration and work-based learning as well. And then the 5th and final recommendation is about redesigning measures of high school success. We want them to focus more directly on post-secondary preparation and success after high school as authentic measures, longer-term views of what it takes to have that success. So there's a lot packed into this report. We hope that you'll take a little bit of time to read through it more closely because there's far more there than I can possibly share here. And I don't want to waste another second in bringing our panelists into this conversation because they have a unique set of experiences that will really help bring to life what it means to do this work at a state level, at a district level, through an intermediary, and the way those things need to function together. So I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce you all today to our panelist, Jane Martínez Dowling, who is the Chief of Student Pathways for New York City Public Schools, Aimee Guidera, who is the Secretary of Education for the Commonwealth of Virginia, And I'll remind you that her role spans pre-K all the way through higher education, so that big picture view. And Scott Laband, who is president of a statewide intermediary organization called Colorado Succeeds. So we bring to you people from all across the country who bring a state perspective, a local perspective, an intermediary perspective, because we know from our work that we've done, all of these pieces have to come together in order for us to really be able to achieve that vision. So thanks to each of you for joining us today. Appreciate your time very much. And I'd like to start with sort of just a big picture question here for all of you. We've laid out a pretty ambitious agenda for pathways, all students on a pathway graduating with momentum through early college credit, work-based learning, credentials of value. There's a lot of work that's going to happen in order to really change our systems and put all students on a path. So I'd like to get each of your reactions, and Aimee, perhaps we can start with you, Secretary Guidera. What will it take to achieve this vision, and where does your work in your state, in Virginia, fit in there?
First of all, Kathleen, thank you for having me today, and thanks for the great report. And we're trying to live up to the vision you just painted in the ESG report. And ESG has been such a great supporter and partner for Virginia. So thank you to you and your team. So it takes a commitment. It takes a commitment to several things. I'll just be really quick, and maybe we can unpack this. I want to hear everybody else, and we can unpack during the hour. But in Virginia, it's a commitment that we've made to saying that how you define success of both our education systems and our workforce development systems are that we are preparing Virginians to be ready for life, period. Right? So for so long in education, we have said success is how much money are we spending? How much did we talk about access? We talk about opportunity. It is about when people spend time, energy, and money in a Virginia institution, are they better off, and are they able to get a job, and do they have greater socioeconomic mobility as a result of spending time, energy, and money in our higher education system and time and energy in our K-12 system? So it's changing our definition of success and what is the outcome that we're actually looking for. I think it's also an acknowledgement that one size does not fit all, and I have the data to show that, that this cannot be, there's only one pathway to success, and that we need to make sure that we are elucidating the pathways to success. And in Virginia, we talk about it, the 3 E's: enrollment, enlistment, and employment. And how do you make sure that that's available to everybody and everyone understands what those pathways look like, what they result in, and how you make information. And the other piece that we do is that we tie every single decision that we're making back, and we make sure that decision makers of all levels, families, individuals, institutions, policymakers, have access to great, timely, actionable information on all things in terms of outcomes of institutions, but also, most importantly, the labor market information. How do we make sure that what we're doing as institutions, but also decisions being made as individuals, is informed by what we know the most high value, high in demand jobs and skill needs are of today and of the future. And those are just a couple of things that we have a statewide commitment to, those really guiding principles. That is about, it is about high expectations, and everything we do is about readiness for life.
Thank you, Secretary. Scott, I saw you nodding your head a few times throughout those comments. I'll let you lean in.
Well, generally speaking, I tend to agree very significantly with Secretary Guidera on a number of issues, but let me just say, Kathleen, what you've put together here in this report is spot on. We in Colorado have very much bought into this idea of the vision that you've put forward. And I should say that while I speak on behalf of the business community at Colorado Succeeds, I'm really lifting up the work of so many colleagues and coalition partners across Colorado who are engaged in this work on a regular basis, from our state government leaders to other nonprofits to learning providers, you name it. But a couple of things that I might just add to the conversation around what's really what it takes to achieve that vision, I think in my mind are sort of two things. The first are the mindsets that we need to change. And Kathleen, you spoke to one of them earlier around this idea of and not or, and changing that pesky narrative that this is a different path or even a less rigorous path. The second narrative piece that I think we're really passionate about is this idea of moving towards a dynamic, agile, responsive mindset as it relates to just how we think about the work of the education to employment pathway and pipeline in general. And sort of not thinking about it as a destination where if we just get to this one point, we can be done, we can set it and forget it. But instead, we need to be continually taking on information and evolving over time, sort of speaking to what Secretary Guidera said about just this actionable information and using it. And then on the other mindset piece, I would say from the business community's lens, we view this as one talent pipeline, one talent system. And that doesn't always bode well for the existing system, which tends to really segment and silo things into either K-12, into higher education, into workforce, that all seem to have a different set of rules, different budgets, different sort of norms in which they operate. And so we would love to see mindset shifts come together where we eliminate those sort of outdated ways of thinking and really move towards new, more collaborative, integrated, and agile ways of thinking. And I'm sure we'll talk about many of those later in the conversation.
We will. So far we've got prepare for life, really change mindsets and de-silo. And Jane, you have the benefit of working at a local level. You're in the middle of the practice. So big picture for you in realizing this vision.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having us. You all are incredible partners at New York City Public Schools, and we're deeply grateful. And the report is my Bible because, as you know, I have come into, more deeply into the career-connected learning space, largely based on my experiences over the last 35 years in education, but really understanding that we cannot move forward without really transforming what both our education and our workforce systems look like. And so at the Office of Student Pathways, we've laid out an ambitious but necessary agenda that every student in New York City should graduate not with just a diploma, but really with a clear sense of direction, tangible assets, and momentum toward a fulfilling career. And achieving that vision is going to really require deep transformation from both our education folks and also our workforce systems. For too long, career-connected learning has been seen as optional or supplemental, and we're really working to make it central to the high school experience. And that means, just like you said at the beginning of the hour, that this means that every student, regardless of background, should have access to a pathway that includes early college credit, industry credentials, work-based learning. And for us, it's also really important that our students have personalized advising. And what we've seen in New York is real traction in our Future Ready NYC schools, where this vision is already being implemented. The schools are reimagining instruction, they're building strong partnerships, and they're aligning supports across student goals. And our role at the central office is to scale that innovation, provide infrastructure, and remove barriers so that every school can offer a high quality pathway experience. And as I said, it's not going to happen through our school mandates alone. We are also investing in professional learning, in coaching, in planning tools that are going to help our schools at the field level really build internal capacity to deliver the vision. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but we're also aligning our accountability systems to measure what matters, student readiness, and not just sitting in their seat. And finally, we are not going to be able to do it alone. We're working really closely with our industry leaders, with our higher ed institutions, with labor partners, community organizations, philanthropists, to really co-design experiences and ensure alignment with real-world experience. Our work at New York City is helping to define what large, diverse urban school districts can do when it commits to career-connected learning at scale. We're not just piloting, we're building systems, we're shifting culture, and setting a new standard for what readiness looks like. And we're hopeful that our model will be transformational across the country in what's to come.
Thank you, Jane. I hear pieces of Secretary Guidera and Scott's comments as well in your response. So I would layer into what I said before. I heard a lot about purpose and partnerships, enabling all of those different kinds of pieces of work that you just mentioned. And so, Aimee, maybe I'll come back to you because you have sort of a unique vantage point here, right? You are K-12 all the way through higher education. No one knows those silos better than you. You're living it every day across your systems and trying to really bring them together. We're talking about designing seamless connected pathways from secondary all the way through post-secondary. Where are the biggest tension points that you're seeing in Virginia? And where's the most exciting collaborative work that's giving you hope that we can actually build these pathways at scale?
So you just said one of what I call my two S's that are the greatest barriers to making those narrative changes that Scott talked about, right? And it's silos and it's the status quo. We are so good in education of doing things we've always the way we've always done it because it's what we knew, it's what it worked for us, and so we just keep doing it. And what we're trying to do in Virginia is to blow up silos and to also give people permission to rethink what schools can look like. Like, how do you help people design the schools and the experiences that you wish you had for yourself, for your child, that you want to teach in, but also you want to hire people out of? And giving people permission to do things differently is a huge part of this job. And I love this job because I get to work, and you just said it, across this incredible swath of education. And I get to work closely with my friends in the workforce development piece because, and you said this beautifully in the report, education is workforce development, and we just need to say that, right? There are not a lot of trust fund babies being born in my world these days, and we are expecting people to work, right? You go to school to learn, to explore, and to get a job. So I'll tell you what we're doing that I think is also helping to do those things. I'll say some quick things, and I have one thing I want to just give one example to show about how we're building those connections. One is we're trying to build lots of one places rather than having, and that's how we break down the silos. We've created common tables where we come together. I'll talk about that later in a later question. But we've also done things like Virginia has the Office of Education Economics, and we have driven and changed statutory language and changed budget definitions so that every decision about what we will invest in is defined by being aligned to the high demand, high value careers that are on the list. And there's one place to go. It's not that everybody gets to pick what they think is the most high value career and the skills. We actually have one place called VOE, the Virginia Office of Education Economics. I encourage all of the viewers to go look at it. It's really cool. I spent my entire career looking for what I called the Holy Grail, which was actionable labor market information so that it can inform decision making. And it was here when I got here, and we've embraced it a lot more. But every decision that's being made in our high schools, our K-12 system, our community colleges, and our higher ed, and our workforce development system is based on that single spot for data so that no one's arguing over that. Two, we have one place for outcomes. I'll talk about that later on. Go look at the SHEV, our State Council for Higher Education for Virginia college outcomes site. That is going to be the go-to place for our 8th graders when they do their new academic and career plans, is that they're going to be going to the VOE data site, and then they're going to be looking at the college outcomes site, and we're going to put our workforce programs outcomes on there as well. So that there's not, oh, if I'm college lit, I'm going to go over to the college websites. If I'm career, I'm going over here. That's called tracking, and we've been doing it for far too long in this country. And by putting all the information in one place, it changes everything and it busts up those silos, but it also changes that narrative, right? Of, oh, I'm supposed to send this kid over here because they're on this side of the tracks and this kid over here to this information source. We're saying, no, you need to expose everyone to everything. We're also doing incentives, and I'll talk more about that when we talk about accountability later on. We're trying to incentivize everyone. We're telling them they have to use this list, but we're also incentivizing people to say, in our new, especially in our new K-12 accountability system, and you saw some data that more and more states are doing this, that incentivizing that just like in New York City, Jane, that every student in Virginia is going to graduate with some college credit or degree and or an industry recognized credential that is not a road to nowhere, which so many of our credentials are in our high schools are today, but is actually, we are only going to pay for those if they are connected to a high demand, high value job, right? And making sure that we have an opinion on that, we will enforce it. And 3, that they are able to pass the ASVAB and they're ready for military. And you get more credit if you do all 3 of those, right? The more students that are doing all of those. So we're incentivizing those equally and not weighting one more than the other. And then the last thing I'll say on this is that we are also have a statewide commitment at every level from 16-year-olds to 66-year-olds to focus on apprenticeships and quality work-based learning. and on just CTE and how do we get more strategic. And again, rethinking in our new Perkins application, we are only doing CTE on things connected to what the labor market requires and what employers say. And we're bringing employers into all these conversations. And I'll end by saying one of the things I'm most proud of, and you said gives the most hope, is our 15 lab schools. The governor came into office announcing that we would launch lab schools that break down the silos, break down the walls between what's happening inside schools and the world or outside, and that you couldn't do this alone by just saying K-12 make this work. Lab school needs to have three things. It needs to have a school division, what we call districts here. It needed to have a higher education partner, either K-12, either 2-year or 4-year, public or private, and it needed to have outside partners, the employer community partners, and that to come together. And then basically we incentivized people to come together, put $100 million in a pot of money, and said, go dream big, build the schools you want. And we just opened 15 of them over the last 2 years, which is extraordinary to open 15 schools from scratch. And they range from everything from an aerospace school on the Eastern Shore to we just opened 2 last week in the maritime trades, one of the most fast growing areas and sectors of Virginia. And each one of them is geared towards making sure students graduate with credentials, college credit, a pathway, work-based experience, and exposure to what's out there and how education's connected to it. So I can talk more about that later, but to me, that puts it all into one place. And the most exciting part about it is how excited the adults are in the system. The parents that were seeing this thing, they cannot believe that their children get to have this kind of exposure to the world, and that learning is on fire. Kids are more curious, and we're going to get better academic outcomes as well as better long-term career outcomes for these students because they are engaged, they are connected, they are learning, and they have a path to success and opportunity.
And that path to success is very market driven. So I appreciate very much that focus on understanding how our economies are changing and good jobs are changing along with it. And so all of that change you're catalyzing there, what I hear across your comments too, is that you're making that change easier, right? You need to understand what the good jobs are. We have it all here in one place. You need to understand what the credentials of value really look like. It's here in one place. And then we're going to provide models for you. We're going to have real places that you can look at and see how that work is happening. 15 schools is a lot, Aimee. I'll say that. Um, Jane, maybe we can circle back to you because you have this work underway. You mentioned earlier your Future Ready NYC initiative. I hesitate to even call it an initiative because it's bold in its transformation appetite. You all are really trying to transform the high school experience into one that is career connected focused. And you've been doing that for 3 years now. You've just entered your 4th year. So your first cohort of kids is at their senior year. So you're just beginning to see how this is taking shape. But all of those kids are having the opportunity to graduate, having completed an industry aligned pathway that has included aligned work-based learning experience, early college credit, credential of value, and you've been really insistent on keeping those pieces together. So headed into your 4th year, what are the impacts you're beginning to see from those who are participating in that full pathways experience?
Thank you, Kathleen. And just to double click on what Secretary Guidera was saying, so much of our work is really data driven and industry aligned, and that has made a huge difference. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in our Future Ready work. A lot of that is qualitative because we are really seeing so many interesting behaviors both in our schools and the culture shifts in our students. But just to give you some proof points right now, 15,000 of our students are already in Future Ready NYC pathways. We have an audacious goal of getting to 100,000 students in Future Ready NYC by 2030. So we have a ways to go, and we have lots of learnings that we are finding. We have traditional CTE schools that are working really closely with us, and we're lifting up our best practices. We are seeing with intentionality the equity impact that our work is having. We're seeing stronger participation from Black students and students living in poverty, more than citywide averages, proof that Pathways is really closing that opportunity gap and not widening it, which is really important to us. It's partly why this work was started. And then Third, our outcome framing around our alumni outcomes, right? Not just like the short term, but what we are beginning to see long term, that students who complete aligned internships are earning $4,000 to $7,000 more per year by age 25. And we're doing those projections with a lot of our partners. But to kind of get more to the qualitative things that we are seeing, when students choose this industry aligned pathway with intentionality, whether it's healthcare, technology, education, or business, they begin to see purpose in their learning. We're seeing an increased amount of engagement, stronger attendance, improved academic performance, because students understand how their coursework is actually connected to their real world careers. Through internships, job shadowing, mentorship, students are developing a professional identity, and they are telling us that, and they're telling their schools that. They're learning how to navigate workplace environments, communicate effectively, and build networks that will support them long after graduation, which you also talked about at the beginning of our conversation. These experiences are especially powerful for students who may not have access to professional networks at home. And students who earn credentials are entering the workforce with marketable skills also, which are really important. The credentials aren't just symbolic, they're helping students secure jobs, apprenticeships, and further training opportunities right out of high school. Another thing that we are seeing, which is really important, and again, what we saw in the report, is that we're seeing students who might not have considered college now enrolling and succeeding because they've already earned credits and they have built their confidence and the ability to do college level work. This is especially impactful for first generation college students and those who come from historically underserved communities. And it is shattering that myth, right, that it has to be either or. It is really what we're seeing is both, that all of our students are beginning to lift up, regardless of whether you're going to college right away or you're going later, or maybe you started some of these programs because you didn't think you were going to go to college, and then you get some credentialing and you get some early college credits and you're excited to go. I mentioned this before, but I just want to underscore that we were built with equity at our core. We've prioritized schools and communities where students have historically faced barriers to college and career success and access. And the impact that we're seeing is really clear. More students from our communities are graduating with tangible assets that really position them well for the future. Participating schools are also having a shift in their culture. We're working really hard to work with our teachers and our school leaders and our superintendents to really center career connected learning in their schools. Teachers are collaborating across disciplines, counselors are aligning supports and pathway goals, and our school leaders are building strong partnerships with industry and higher education, which I think is going to make the transformation systemic and also sustainable. As we enter into the next phase of Future Ready NYC, our focus is to do two things that are hard to do at the same time, but we want to deepen the quality of the experience while at the same time expanding access to more students across the city. We're committed to ensuring that every student, regardless of their zip code, can graduate with a clear pathway to economic mobility and personal fulfillment.
That's a lot of kids in New York City. That's a big space.
And we want them to stay because it's, as we know, we see declining enrollment around it, but we have a lot of work to do, but we're excited to do it, and we think we have the right foundation to move it forward.
And I hear a lot between your comments and Amy's comments too about this is really about expanding opportunities for kids, right? This is about preparing them for a wide range of opportunities and then letting them have choice. What is it that you want to do next? And you are prepared to do that thing. Post-secondary education, great, let's go in that direction. You need to go directly into a job. We've prepared you in a way that you can start with a living wage. Very likely, you're probably doing both of those things. How many of our learners are going to school and working to earn money? And so expanding the range of opportunities in front of them. And I also hear both of you talk about the market-driven piece and understanding the good job opportunities. So Scott, I want to turn to you because here you are in an employer-facing intermediary organization. Your role really connects business and industry with education and workforce development. And you've done a lot of work through Colorado Succeeds in being able to do that. But somewhat recently, back in 2022, and now you're adding on to this work, you launched Project Scale. You brought more than 40 industry and education leaders together to design stackable credential pathways, specifically within construction. You started with a very specific focus, and it wasn't just an industry focus, it was a goal, stackable credential pathways. And you can tell us more, but I understand that to have been so successful that perhaps you are now leaning into new sectors to do similar work. My question is, what have you learned about bringing educators and employers together in successful partnership aligned around this end goal? And how do you get employers to the table in that way? Because we hear that question all the time.
We sure do. And Kathleen, thanks for asking it. So as I reflect back on the last couple of years in Project Scale and what we've learned, a couple of key things stand out. I'd probably say four. The first one is treating employers not as advisors, but as co-owners. Oftentimes we simply reach out to employers and ask them to advise on things that we've already done and think that that's sufficient. In today's day and age, I think that's even less sufficient than usual because we're starting to experience significant employer fatigue as more and more people go to employers and say, we want your input and feedback on that. All well-intentioned and well-meaning, but if not done well, actually can have a negative impact. And so we're starting to see employers stop showing up to meetings because they feel like it's a lot of talk. They're either being talked at or just a lot of happy talk and not a lot of action. And so a handful of things that we learned was you have to be extremely structured and you have to be extremely results oriented anytime you're engaging the employer community. We have embraced what is called Talent Pipeline Management, or TPM, that was created by the U.S. Chamber Foundation. Our team has been trained in that, and we deliver that as a process. And so that creates a scope and a sequence, not for the end game or for the outcome, but for really the process that we use to interact with employers throughout to try and make sure that it's a high quality, high ROI use of their time. The second big factor then kind of relates to that, which is you just have to invest in high quality data. We've heard it here already, and I'll just reiterate it again. And importantly, primary source data. Yes, there's a lot of great secondary sources out there. We all know who they are, but getting that primary source data is really critical. And what I mean by that is we actually sign non-disclosure agreements with these employers where they hand over their human resources applicant training, applicant systems, their data systems, where that we can see who they're hiring, where are they coming from, how long they're staying, when they're getting promoted. And what that does is it really lays out the ecosystem of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You can start to see where the big gaps are, where the opportunities are. Importantly, you can see who is doing really well in meeting employer demand and therefore should receive more resources to help them scale, and who needs some improvement because they're not quite meeting the mark and needs additional feedback or interaction from employers in order to get there. The next piece, I would say number 3 for us, was really building pathways partnerships with innovative providers. And so for this, we worked with our state community college system. And what we did there, I thought was pretty unique. The community college system, in their wisdom, is providing 45 credit hours of college credit for people who come in with a 3-year apprenticeship. And so just to backtrack, these are high school students graduating, go directly into the workforce. They work in a 3-year apprenticeship in the skilled trades. Now the community college is providing 45 credit hours for those 3 years. And then the employers are co-creating with those same institutional presidents what those last 15 credit hours look like. And so they're embedding exactly what the employers are looking for as they hope to upskill and promote those individuals out of frontline work and into more managerial work, whether it be things like forecasting or budgeting or estimating or project management. And so what that does is it ultimately gets those individuals an associate's degree in construction management that has been partially done on the job, partially done in the classroom, and stacks fully into a bachelor's degree if they would like it to, and if they want to pursue their education further. The employers are paying for these classes because they see so much value in the skills and competencies that the learners are gaining exposure to and mastering during the process. And then the last big learning we had there was just not reinventing the wheel. If you find something that works, try and scale it. And so what we did in the process was we identified 2 different high school curricula that worked really well on setting up people for success in the skilled trades and into some of those apprenticeships. We then went to our state's career and technical education office and said, if there's any high school in Colorado that's looking for Perkins funding in construction, it better be aligned to one of these two programs that the employer has vetted and sourced. Otherwise, you're wasting your time and effort. And so they've agreed to that, and that's helping us reach scale, access statewide, making sure that these kinds of opportunities are ubiquitous. And to your earlier point, Kathleen, because of the success of this, we have seen employers actually FOMO into the process, where the number of employers that we have around our table, our employer collaborative in construction, is growing. But now we also have other employer collaboratives in Colorado's advanced industries like clean tech, like advanced manufacturing, quantum computing, aerospace, and the life sciences. And so excited to continue to scale, project scale, really, in the next couple of years.
Scaling project scale. I love it.
Yeah, it's very meta.
But I would say a lot of the reason you have employers now coming to you is because you were so focused on a particular goal, and then you had a result to show for it, one that's really impactful. And there's a lot that you shared there, but I'm going to focus on one point in particular that I'd like you and Aimee to focus on, which is that you have a unique advantage when you work at a state level because you can influence policy, tools and resources, incentives, all the funding, right? All the different things that can impact local practice. So that curriculum that you just talked about, bringing it up to a state level and saying, we're going to do this across the entire state, right? You want to use this state funding, you got to put these pieces together. I think that's especially important when it comes to quality pathways work, that state role to create that really strong policy environment connected to clear resources and strategies and models. And Aimee, you talked about this a little bit earlier, but I wonder for both of you if you could say a little bit about how do you see the role of state policymakers in quality pathways? And do you have advice for state leaders? You've done a lot of work in your respective states. They're two very different states. What advice would you give any state leader out there on moving in this direction?
I'll go
And
fast, I'm sure
I was going to say, you're off mic,
Yeah.
Aimee, so you go ahead.
It's so important. And again, why I love this job. So one of the things that I hope continues after I leave, and I think it will, is that we now bring together one table twice a week. We started once a month, and the participants said, no, we actually need, well, there's so much to do. We need to do this twice a week. And it's an 8 o'clock meeting with the agency heads from what I call the 5 talent agencies. K-12, pre-K, the Virginia Department of Education, pre-K through 12th, community college system, which is our 23 colleges, the State Council for Higher Education, which is our 15 four-year publics, all independent, but that's loosely connected. And then our Virginia Works, which is our now combined single workforce agency, which brings all of the things together, which this administration was able to do after 30 years of talking about. So we now have all of our workforce development programs and different organizations under one roof. And then also the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, because this is about attracting and retaining great companies to come into Virginia is by having talent. And we do the 8 o'clock meeting with just the agency heads with no agenda other than what does everyone around this table need to know? What's happening? What are the issues? What are we hearing? And it's basically a strategy group of like, how do we, if we have one goal and our shared goal is for Virginia to be, I hate to say this to all of you all, sorry, Scott, to be the best state for talent. If we have that goal, how do we make sure that we are all rowing towards that North Star? And what does that mean? And what do we need from each other? Then the 9 o'clock hour, we bring our talent teams together. And so everyone will bring 3, 5. I say we can get a bigger room. Just keep bringing people and they all come together. And what's so amazing about it is that we now, it's part of that, what we talked about earlier, breaking down the silos. You cannot break down silos if you don't have shared goals. And you cannot break down silos and break up that status quo commitment if people don't know each other. So the most important thing here, people have each other's phone numbers. We have people who never knew each other before now calling each other and working. And we just had an extraordinary conversation on Friday about our Perkins application and what we're going to do in terms of how are we all going to define that high value piece, and that there's so many definitions of how we fix the statute. But I'll just really quickly, the advice for others is when I think about the state policy role, I think about it in terms of the 4 Bs. And that's what has changed now because we have that single table that are doing what I call the state policy levers, the 4 Bs together. One is budgets. We are now in that group, money is your value statement. We are now developing our single budget for talent across those 5 agencies, which is extraordinary. Everybody's saying, yep, this is the priorities. We're gonna have a tight budget year. Here's how we're doing it. How do we spend our money? And our legislative agendas as well. Second of all is just the bureaucracy, which I say lovingly, not as a term. And part of it is getting people to actually work together and have each other's phone numbers is the first step to a beautiful relationship where you work together. Is you have to know who's in charge of what, where, and how do we say, and your job is to connect together and to work constantly. I don't care if you work in 2 different offices, you need to do that. So that whole idea of getting everybody, and in our administration, we've now created OKRs for every single agency. And those 5 agencies, it is all about creating the best talent development system in the country. The third B is boards. And we have been very explicit. Scott, I loved what you said about engaging employers and how do you do it. One of the ways we've tried to change the narrative around preparing people for life is to put people who have experiences who are employers and hiring people on our boards so that they are literally having conversations about K-12 from a point of view of, I need to hire these people. And one of the things I'm really proud about when we reset our proficiency definitions to be, from being the lowest in the nation to the highest, our board just voted on Friday. On our proficiency setting committee, we actually had 30% of the people serving on that committee who prior always used to be just teachers and psychometricians. 30% were members of higher education institutions and employers who could say, this is what is needed to be able to be ready for life, and how do we define academic readiness? Totally cool. And then the fourth B is the bully pulpit. It is how do we use our voices from all those agency heads, but I've got an incredible communicator, my boss, who is the best communicator ever about this, he'll say to everyone, the best 3 words in the English language after I love you is you have a job, you are hired, so he says, right? And so he's constantly talking about investing in people and investing in people that lead to those jobs that will lead to a life that's fulfilling and wages that allow you to support a family and to grow. So those are what I think about, that what are we doing differently in those 4 Bs as a state that makes it possible for the Janes of the world at the local level to do her innovation, because she's got this background of support that's going on from the state level, from the budget, the bureaucracy, these boards that are managing these organizations, and just the narrative change, which is what the bully pulpit is.
Scott, anything to add there?
Well, Aimee, that was incredibly comprehensive and so well aligned. I appreciate you mentioning employers on boards. We talk a lot about that too, and that's a key aspect of our work. Kathleen, in Colorado that we have prioritized the big 3. It's essentially your core 3 rebranded for Colorado. Don't ask me why, but it's essentially the exact same thing. And in order for that to happen, we really believe that several key policy criteria needs to be in place. And so when you think about those, I'd break them into 4 buckets as well. So data, making sure that you have transparent data to shine a light on the outcomes that are out there. So families, employers, institutions can all see where the ROI is, and they can see areas to improve and navigate to the places that are the best fit. Funding, making sure that we're tying funding to those outcomes. So looking not just at enrollment, but at completion, employment, and earnings, as well as promotion, and seeing people actually move towards economic mobility. Transfer, and really looking at how we're thinking about articulation agreements, starting in high school, moving into post-secondary, broadly defined, and ensuring that we create a lot of permeable pathways with no dead ends and some equivalency between folks who might be doing apprenticeships and folks who might be doing other more academic routes. And then accountability, making sure that we have key performance indicators and the governance systems in place to monitor the health of the system and to incentivize the things that we really care about. And so this most recent year in Colorado passed a handful of policies, and I should say this is many thanks to the incredible work of a coalition called the Homegrown Talent Coalition that's been working on this for many years. And part of it was a transparency play and just helping to make sure that we get good information to students and parents about the things that they're doing among those big 3 in high school and how they actually have currency and value in the post-secondary setting and what's going to transfer and how. Secondly, we really looked at funding and trying to take some of the funding that the state had. It's not as much money as other people in the state have mentioned, but at least 20 to 30 million, and trying to invest it very strategically in the outcomes that we're asking for schools and districts to provide to young people while they're in high school. I should also just mention Colorado had to cut $1 billion out of our budget last year. We'll have to do it again, and yet we were able to find new money to invest in this. So it really is a priority of the states. And then third, on accountability, like we for a long time have said that these are the kinds of experiences that we hope young people have in high school, and yet they never showed up on accountability frameworks. And so as a state, Colorado changed that this year and is starting to look at those things like credentials of value, like concurrent enrollment, like the work-based learning experiences as part of the school and district performance frameworks that help really put in the incentives in place so that young people and schools are all rewarded when those things happen. And then lastly, I'll just put in a plug that I feel like with Workforce Pell coming down the pike from the feds, there's a huge opportunity to work on that as we think about things like quality, as we think about things like data and funding. So those conversations will just continue for us.
Huge opportunity with Workforce Pal, no doubt. I heard you and Aimee both talk about accountability. We're going to move in that direction in just a moment because I think we've gotten a question or two in our Q&A chat about that as well. But I want to pivot back just for a minute because Scott, you talked about work-based learning tied into that. And Jane, you all are doing a lot in work-based learning in the Future Ready initiative. That's one of your core components that is non-negotiable, connected to the early college coursework and the credentials. You have been able to build the continuum of work-based learning directly into your pathways. You have Career Discovery Week, and that pushes into employer design challenges, which pushes into internships, and then for some kids, youth apprenticeships, and really giving them the opportunity to apply what they're learning in the classroom and testing it out. What do I like about this? What am I good at this? How do I develop more skills along these lines? And how is that valued, to Scott's point, right? In the accountability, and you'll share a little more about that later. That's not easy to do anywhere, much less in a city the size of New York City, to begin providing those experiences at scale. So I would imagine you've done quite a bit with partnerships, industry partners, intermediary partners. Say a little bit about how you've been able to provide quality work-based learning experiences at such a scale.
Sure. I think one important thing that we have to keep centered as we center students is, we are addressing something in a city as large as ours, that the fragmentation is enormous, right? And our ability to play a bigger role in field building, direction setting, and coordination, we really feel that very deeply, so that our dense network of CBOs and direct service providers are all rowing in the same direction. We talked a lot about within the ecosystems of schools being really intentional about industry partners and what we're focusing on based on data. We want to do that outside in our overall community as well. And as you said, it's difficult to provide work-based learning experiences like internships at scale. So we've brought in intermediaries like grant associates, expanded schools, and others that focus on that priority in particular. I think the thing that is really important to remember is that our success is rooted in strong relationships. I mean, that's pretty much it. We've cultivated deep partnerships with industry leaders, with labor unions, with community organizations, and as I said earlier, with higher ed institutions. These partners don't just host students, they co-design experiences, they mentor youth, they help us ensure that our programming reflects the skills and the expectations of modern workforce. And everyone is in that partnership. We have councils at the state level. We have folks, particularly, I'd like to call out the Partnership for New York City, who puts together the Career Week, and they keep us honest. Like when we are thinking about program designing, schools are very different than employer and the private sector, and really understanding like what is reasonable to assume and achieve from our private partners are often, those folks really talk to us a lot about what that means. And our intermediaries do the same as they're doing our placements for our students. The organizations help us manage logistics, support schools, maintain quality across thousands of student experiences, and they have an expertise that allows us to scale without compromising on equity or rigor. And as we move forward, our focus is to really just deepen that impact of those experiences and expanding access to even more students. And we are constantly, every year, reassessing, like, how did our intermediaries do? Did we meet the goals that we had in place? And then making sure that we're building that system so that every young person graduates with a strong sense of purpose, a professional network, and skills to thrive in college, career, and life.
So I think connected to that, because I want to pivot back. That's incredibly helpful to think about scaling and work-based learning, and it's a little bit connected back to the earlier questions and comments around accountability. And I don't always mean accountability with a capital A. I think there's both capital A and lowercase a, right? But in both New York City and in Virginia, you all have started with a pretty clear picture in mind of what you want the end result to be. And you've given a lot of thought to measuring that on the front end, which doesn't always happen. A lot of times it's let's design a program and go forth. And then later we try to figure out what it is we are going to try to accomplish. But both in Virginia and New York City, you've given a lot of thought to what are the measures of success and how do we capture those to tell us something about our impact here. So Aimee and Jane, I wonder if you can say a little bit about what you're doing to ensure measurement and accountability drives those student outcomes. And Aimee, maybe we'll start with you and then move to Jane.
I'll be real fast. I know we're near the end. I'd encourage everyone to go look at both this, the School Performance Support Framework, which is our new accountability system for K-12. And if you go to the Virginia Department of Education or my website, Secretary of Education, you can go see it. Bottom line, it's everything you just said, Kathleen. What we said is you measure what matters, right? And then you hold people accountable for results of getting there. And it's not accountability to make people feel badly. It's accountability in the form of transparency so that we know how well every single school is serving every student. And in our minds, success is, remember, preparing students for success post-secondary, no matter what their dream is. But to make sure, and that these conversations cannot start in 9th grade, they have to start earlier. And so our accountability system literally starts in K-12 and K-5 with a readiness for success indicator that focuses on how many students have the foundational skills necessary so that they're ready for advanced work in middle school. In middle school, we're giving extra, bonus points for the accountability for how many students are taking advanced coursework and do that because they have mastered the content. But then also in 8th grade, every single 8th grader will now do an academic and career plan that is no longer a compliance exercise, but informed by that labor market information, and actually starts to have to go and look at the outcomes pieces on the SHEV outcomes site. I encourage you to look at college outcomes on the SHEV website to actually draw their pathways based on data. And then in high schools are accountable, as I said earlier, for the number of students who graduate with credential, credit, or readiness for military. Not just exposure, not just access, not getting that smell of the perfume, but actually mastery of content that says they're there. So what we've basically done is incentivized better decision making also, but our schools putting the time, effort, and focus on ensuring every child is ready for success because they get rewarded for it, their accountability and the transparency. So in my mind, it really matters to do that, and that we hold them accountable. We're like, why are certain kids not ready when that we know that that is the goal we're doing, and how do we then put supports into that to make sure that those schools get the supports, the interventions that they need to make sure every single student graduates ready for life.
Thank you. And Jane, maybe you want to say just a minute worth on the key implementation metrics you've created.
Sure. I mean, one thing to start off with for us is that traditional accountability systems often, they focus narrowly on test scores and graduation rates. But if we really want to prepare students for life after high school, we need to measure what actually drives long-term success, credentials, work-based learning, early college credit, and career-connected experiences. And as you said, in New York, while the state's ESSA accountability system provides a foundation, New York City's, we're going further by embedding what we call the KIMS, which is our key implementation measure, into a school's planning and evaluation. And we've been doing that since August with the schools that participate in FRNYC, where schools are held accountable for delivering on 5 core components: ECC, industry credentials, career-connected learning, work-based learning, and individualized advising and instruction. These measures, they're tracked through a school-level planning tool and supported by professional learning, coaching, and data systems. And our office works closely with schools and district support to ensure accountability is not punitive, but it's actually supportive and capacity building, helping schools to deliver meaningful outcomes for students. I think for us, it's really important that as we continue to evolve the systems, the goal is to make accountability a lever for innovation and not just compliance. and that really resonates with our district leaders and our superintendents.
Thank you. I know we have just 1 minute, and so apologies. I know we've gotten a couple questions in the chat about AI. It seems to be the question everyone's asking. So apologies that we haven't gotten to that one, but I do want to just give each of you 15 seconds. So it's very short, but quick lightning round. If you think about the future of this work, what is your vision 10 years from now? If you picture pathways in 2035, what does that look like in Virginia, in Colorado, in New York City? So, Scott, you go.
Okay. By 2035, all students will have completed the 3 in the big 3 or the core 3. 2, every employer collaborative will look similar to Project Scale so that we can get real insights in real time from employers about where the labor market is going. And 3, we'll have a state longitudinal data system with user-friendly reporting to provide high-quality insights to parents and learners as they navigate the system.
Well done. Beautiful. Aimee, 15 seconds.
Very simply, success in 15 years, 10 years, next year is every graduating senior out of our high schools never says the words, "if I had only known."
Love that. Jane, last words.
I have to say, we hear that a lot from our superintendents, Aimee, so that was very, very funny. Just one thing for us, if we do this right, New York City can serve as proof that in the largest, most diverse school district in the nation, we can make career-connected learning universal. And I hope that 10 years from now, when we measure success, it's not going to just be by students having diplomas, but by opportunities and momentum of our graduates that they've carried forward into college, career, and life, and in spaces that we didn't even know existed today.
Beautiful. Thank you. And thank you to each of you for joining us today. Incredibly helpful. We do have this recording, so we will make that available in case anyone wants a copy of that. Forging Futures report, we also have that information that we'll make available. So thanks to everyone who joined us today. Thanks to our guests, and we'll forge ahead. Thanks, everyone.